Hello. I'm sorry about this mess behind me. I'm writing another dodgy film. It's a great honour to be allowed to speak to you all today. I'm not an expert and you're surrounded by excellent experts, so I will try to be quite quick. Vision is self-evidently a massive health issue around the world. I wore glasses from the age of 9 until when I was 50, and I had what I'm guessing was a pretty expensive but very effective eye operation. My wife and 2 of my children wear glasses or contact lenses. My dad had glaucoma, but because of the miracle of medicine, it didn't interfere with his life really at all. I remember him putting drops in his eyes for 20 years and his eyesight held up till he died, aged 86, able to see the faces of the people who loved him. But oh, what a different story for families in poorer countries and communities. Their lives, their ability to work and relish their lives damaged, sometimes destroyed by failing and disappearing eyesight. What a shocking injustice and what a terrible waste. Sometimes solutions to our problems in the world are epic and epically expensive. But here's something where a few pounds, where a few dollars can and will change a life. We should all always be looking out for these easier things. We should be ticking off the list of massive but important wins instead of putting them aside for future generations. We should bank this. We should crack this issue of vision now. I've been obsessed throughout my life by 2 things. First, how small bits of money can actually radically transform lives. This has been at the basis of all my charity work, and Regaining Vision is the perfect example of this. But I'm also obsessed by the epic ambition of the SDGs with their beautiful structure of interwoven solutions to all the world's problems. And the question of vision is again a perfect example of this. Vision is one of the solutions to poverty, SDG 1, a crucial part of health and mental well-being, SDG 3, one of the ways to maintain and create decent work and economic growth, SDG 8. This isn't a fringe issue. It's a miraculous opportunity, if we grab the moment, to create a just system for all that will change millions of lives forever. John Milton, the great English poet, went blind at the age of 43. He wrote a famous poem called On His Blindness, and he asks how he can serve God properly when he lives without sight in this dark world and wide. It ends with one of the most quoted lines in English literature. They also serve who only stand and wait. That line was written in around 1655. Now, 500 years later, millions of people facing blindness are still waiting. It's a disgrace and it's a glorious opportunity. Let's grab it with both hands so the next generation of men and women has the God-given gift of sight. And that'll be done if all the men and women in this room stay determined and get the job done. Thank you so much. Good luck. Thanks for being there.
Why don't we just show our appreciation once again for an absolute legend. I mean, the mind that can create comic relief and Mr. Bean is somebody I follow and want to listen to. And his commendation of our work and your work is just phenomenal. Let's hear it again for Richard Curtis. What an absolute star. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Well, what a treat to see those Young Systems leaders honoured again this morning. Of course, to all of them, we saw 3 on stage last night. I know that some can't be with us today. Can I say a massive thank you to all of the teams that helped put on what I thought was the most fantastic reception last night. Wasn't that absolutely phenomenal? Absolutely delicious, by the way. And somebody sidled up to me over the tacos, if I can say that, and they said, Ollie, I've got a question for you. They said, where do you get your energy then? And I said, it wasn't the picante sauce or anything. I said, the only answer to that is I get it from the people around me. And this is totally sidebar unscripted, so I'll keep it brief. I do events around the world where occasionally guests honestly don't know why they're there. Somebody's sent them, they've stumbled in, they've got to the wrong floor. This summit is the opposite. 2030 Insight Live is the most deliberate, focused, passionate gathering global gathering I think I've ever encountered in my life. And it's an absolute honor. It's an absolute honor to be here, and I'm absolutely loving co-hosting with Gloria. Can we hear it for Gloria again, please? And we've got so much to introduce you to today. So onwards, we are still simultaneously translating, so thank you very much to the team for that. We're on channel 1 in the main room. My daily warning to, or encouragement, I should say, to return your headsets at the end of the day. Very important. I'm also delighted to welcome our youngest delegate. Congratulations, Priya, on your wonderful new arrival. Good morning, young sir. Yes! That's next generation Baba. We need a new category. All right. Now, welcome back. If you're joining us online, it's very good to see you. Welcome, or indeed if you're catching up. And of course, here in the room, we've got lots of interactivity with some polling questions through our sessions today. So that'll keep you on your toes. If you haven't downloaded the app by now, please do. It's on the CrowdComms app, and that password is Insight Live. It's really simple, brilliantly helpful to navigate everybody who's here. Here. Now, we've got so many extraordinary countries represented at Insight 2030 Live, and I want to introduce a minister from just one of those countries. They have a role which, frankly, I think every country should have, which is to say they are the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs. If only more countries had such a minister. That minister is Kirk Humphrey, and I'm delighted to say that he not only joins us for this speech, but has been with us throughout our summit. Please welcome the Honourable Kirk Humphrey, MP. I'm going to bring you up to the mic, because I see you're going to speak on that. I hope you didn't mind me spotting you yesterday.
That's okay. I'm happy to be here.
What have you made of the summit so far?
Well, it's been brilliant. I mean, this is, as you said, probably the liveliest crowd I've seen in a long time. And I have a conference in November, and I've learned a lot of things that I want to take home as well, so I'm happy to be here.
We're very happy to do fact-finding missions to Barbados. If you would, aren't we, team? I mean,
you are all invited to Barbados. I'm happy to have you.
Sign here. All right. But seriously, what was your highlight of yesterday, would you say? You've talked about the energy, the variety.
Well, I mean, there were many highlights, but I particularly enjoyed one of the side events that spoke about the economic impact of blindness and eye loss. And I found that particularly invigorating for me, because I think for policymakers like myself, it makes sense to argue this case in data. And so I found it particularly enlightening.
Yeah, thank you for engaging in that. We're honored to have you here. Minister Humphrey, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I must tell you that I had a very long speech, but I made notes last night. So for those who wrote my speech, I apologize. The guy who's sitting right there. Excellencies, it is a pleasure to be here with you this morning. As I said, I was here from yesterday. And I must also tell you that I wasn't originally supposed to be here. The Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Mottley, had agreed to come and could not make it. And I am here in her stead. Not that anybody could replace the Prime Minister if you all know her. But I'm happy to be here. I learned a lot of things yesterday. When I asked the Prime Minister before I left, I said, PM, why is this conference so important to you? I mean, we have a lot of things going on. I'm busy. You're busy. And she told me, I don't know if you all know Ambassador Webson, but she said, Ambassador Webson asked her to do it, and that's one of the reasons she wanted to do it. And then she went on to tell me that she has, which I knew, but she has an aunt who was disabled, and she was raised in a household with a disabled aunt. And she spent her time being raised by the aunt, and now she's taking care of that aunt. And that has shaped her approach to public policy. And I imagine, as I listened to these stories yesterday, a lot of what I believe I heard should be crafted in a way that we could also use these stories powerfully to shape public policy. I found these stories particularly enlightening, particularly moving, but I also felt that they could push the needle forward. And I also think that we have to go about this in a very systematic way. I do not think that we could talk about blindness in silos. We cannot do it in small corners. We have to be systematic, and I always argue that we have to be strategic. And I say so because for us, in small island developing states, and for you too, it's all over the world, the future is not what it used to be. We had all planned for a different future, right? And every day we're saying more and more reasons why we recognize the future is just not what it used to be. And if you think about the amount of geopolitical conflicts they have, for us in the region, we're battling climate change events daily. I mean, we're seeing lightning strikes in Barbados that are unprecedented. We're having hurricanes that are the most powerful hurricanes we've seen. The world is changing, and we have to be able to respond to those changes. And I also think we in this room have to be able to adapt to the changes as well. But you know, cities are vulnerable. And for those who are vulnerable, like countries like Barbados and other small island developing states, the persons who are most vulnerable within that group are persons with disabilities. And particularly persons who have suffered eye loss, and regrettably, a lot of avoidable eye loss and unnecessary blindness. And so the question is, even as we build out our social protection framework, I'm a social scientist by training, and we built out a lot of social protection frameworks, but that those social protection frameworks oftentimes do not include the most vulnerable populations. And how do we then strengthen our social protection frameworks to be able to include the people who need the support the most? The truth is, it offers a kind of false security, right? Like you have your plans, but then your plans do not work because you did not include the people for whom the plans were meant to address. But I am very happy that the UN had outlined a very ambitious agenda, I'm sure we all know. The Secretary General report on a common agenda to accelerate progress on the SDGs. And I made the point yesterday as well that I think we have to be able to translate the SDGs into language that the ordinary people understand. You have to translate your role and your desires from the SDGs into ordinary language so that ordinary people can understand it. But at the same time, we also have to translate it so that influential people understand it, right? So you want to be able to reach both sets of people at the same time. And being able to do that work, I think, is the work of this group, it is the work of this conference. To walk away with language and terminology that people across the world can be able to understand. So in Barbados, for example, we've established a public pediatric eye care clinic, well, a whole series of them. We're about to start testing children, and which I think is very important, screening children. You would have heard yesterday as well when, I think when Eduardo was speaking, how he spoke of not being able to see comfortably, and people misinterpreting that for him being unintelligent, and consequentially for him being labeled as a deviant person. So these interconnections, I think, are very important. And we have to frame these interconnections as part of our policy dialogue. Eduardo also made the point that sports is important, and I think he made the point like 3 or 4 times. The idea that we must be able to take care of our bodies as children. Most of the issues that I'm dealing with in Barbados, and I should tell you, I should have told you at the beginning actually. So I'm the Minister of People Empowerment, and you probably don't know what that means, though thank you very much for making it sound very cool. But I am the Minister of People Empowerment. I have responsibility for persons with disabilities, for the elderly, for children, for HIV, for women and gender. What else, John? Huh? Oh, I said childcare. Welfare issues and disaster response in terms of social response. So it's a big ministry. But I'm saying to you at the end of the day, most of the groups with which I deal, I believe a lot of our issues could be avoided if we were having healthy children engaged in sport and activity. I just want to repeat the point that Eduardo made because I think it was a brilliant contribution to the conversation. But again, I make the point because this unnecessary phrase that Ambassador used was unnecessary blindness. It's a serious tragedy, but it is an avoidable tragedy and something that I think we have to be able to fix. And I also know when I became a politician, as a young politician, very passionate about everything, I wanted to change the world. I learned very early that it is okay to be passionate, but you also have to be strategic if you want to make change. So passion will only get you so far. But if you really want to make change, you also have to be strategic. And that is why I found the session yesterday so informative, because it gave a lot of data, and data normally informs policymakers. We want to see numbers. You know, when we're tasked with a budget, like I just label all of mine, I have children, disabilities, welfare, but I have a smaller budget than I would like. And the person who makes the better argument is likely to get the larger share of the budget. And I found yesterday during the course of the conversation that a lot of the work that is being done here is so transformative and so important. And I'm actually going home to speak on a debate on population. And I intend to spend my entire debate speaking about blindness and eye loss because of what I've learned here during the course of this conversation. Yeah, because, you know, I heard that 2.2 billion people are affected. That's a lot of people. But yet it is not part of the conversation. I had a conversation during the reception yesterday evening where I spoke to someone about aging. There was a conversation around aging and gender and eye loss and vision loss, and yet we're not having those kind of conversations. I just think that if we put our collective minds together, we can do a lot more than we have been able to do. And again, I think that it is all part of being strategic, because there's no doubt that a person's quality of life is impacted if they are dealing with things that perhaps they should not have had to deal with. And because the systems that we have are not meant, were never built, were never prepared for this. The systems at the local level, and I dare say the international systems, the international organizations that we serve, the international organizations that we laud, they were never built to respond to this. And so you find yourself knocking on a door that was never meant to be open for you. And in many ways, I think the time has come for people to create their own institutions, have their own doors, so that your argument becomes the argument that matters most. That is where I think the work in this room also lies. But there have been some advances. I don't want to say there haven't been. There have been many. In Barbados, across the world as well, we've seen persons getting assistive devices. But like in most things, where the assistive devices go to people perhaps who make the most noise. So we have to be able to make sure we have equitable distribution. So I want to close. I mean, I had a lot more things to say, but I think my 10 minutes may be up. Am I close? I'm okay? Okay, good. So I want to say that I am heartened. I wrote this out and I want to read it. So did I get it right? Heartened by the work of the International Agency for Prevention of Blindness. And I think this is an approach that should be replicated other places, and it's certainly one that I support and one that I think I would go home and speak fondly of. I'm actually thinking, Ollie, that I may need you for my conference, to be honest, man. You're amazing. In fact, I don't know if you all translate vibe in Spanish, but y'all guys are a vibe. And ¿cómo se dice vibe en español? But you guys are a vibe, and you know, this conference has really been heartwarming, and I confess, as I reached near the end of my presentation, I confess that I was so busy. I was in Peru last week, and I really didn't want to be here. But I was talking to the Prime Minister last night, and she asked me, she said, how is it? I was like, it's great. Like, I'm happy to be here. And I want to thank you, because it really has been great. I found the conference great, the side events to be great. And I'm happy because I think you're repping for SIDS, and that small island developing states need a voice wherever we can find a voice. And I'm happy to be a partner in this process, and I'm happy to have you as a partner in this process. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done for us to do. And I think a lot of that work will be done in partnerships, whether it is vertical partnerships, horizontal partnerships, South-South partnerships, government-private partnerships. I think there's a lot of work to be done, and that work can be done in partnership. And I'm willing to be, on behalf of Barbados, a partner for you. I'm sure the Caribbean region, through Ambassador Webson, is more than willing to be a partner for you as well. So we've seen a shift in eye health care, and we're hopeful that by 2030, we can make sure this becomes the norm, you know? We're hopeful for 2030. 2030 is a day away. I'm saying that to say that the urgency of this moment really, like, this is the most urgent moment, and we cannot afford to waste it. And I think COVID has taught us that the world is not the world that we're used to. COVID has also shown us that people who had vulnerabilities suffered the most. COVID taught us that during that time we got the largest budgets. Health ministries got amazing budgets. Social ministries got amazing budgets. And all of a sudden they're cutting our budgets. And I think it's that we're allowing the world to return to normal, and we cannot let the world return to normal. And the reason I say that is because if they cut the health budget and they cut the social budget, we're going to cut your budget. You don't want us to cut your budget. So we all have to be part of that larger conversation. In our recent VNRs, the voluntary national reviews, we reported a lot of things related to eye health. I think Barbados did it. Other countries did it. It was really a good precedent for the world. And therefore, I'm happy to be part of this conversation. So I want to close, basically, skip a whole lot of pages. I said a lot of things I wasn't planning on saying. But I do want to say that I think now is the time for us to be able to avoid avoidable sight loss, right? Like, this is the time. I think we can do it. I think the energy is in the room to do it. I think if we partner, we can be able to make sure that it happens. I think it is too universal a problem. It affects too many people for it to be such a small part of the conversation. And I want to call on the global eye health sector to unify and to harness these new opportunities. We must do so. And I pledge again my personal support in any way that I can. I'm really happy to the organizers of this event for having me. I learned a lot, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Humphrey, especially for those glowing endorsements of our 2030 Insight Live gathering, and just such a testimony to the dividend paid from investing your time and energy in an event, that clarity that comes from sitting in some of those sessions, really powerful, so thank you. There's also a lesson to me that if you give a thumbs up to speak for another 2 minutes, you sometimes get invited to events, which is brilliant. So I got a big takeaway. The future is not what it used to be. It blew my mind. So powerful to revisit, to rethink, and as one of our guests said yesterday, to create the future together. So thank you. Really helpful setup for everything that is now going to come. I'm going to introduce somebody who you all know already because they're the chief executive of the IAPB. I must say that Peter leads the IAPB throughout the year, and yet on this stage typically appears for a couple of minutes to say some very sincere thank yous. It says in my script, Peter Holland keynote. It may be a typo. If it is, it's fine, and I apologize. But ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Peter Holland.
Ollie, thank you very much indeed for the introduction. Possibly because I have to follow speeches like Minister Humphrey's is why I give the thank yous and welcomes. Minister Humphrey, thank you so much for what was an extraordinary speech. My WhatsApp notifications were going completely mad throughout it, and I've got a message saying, can you come back every year? So I'm sure we will be inviting you again. And you're right, Ollie. I think this. I have given a keynote speech before, but I think it was back in about 2018. So this is the first time for a long time. Victoria, you asked to hear from me at the AGM, so here goes. Over the past 2 days, we've heard some incredibly powerful stories. We've been reminded everyone who has sight loss is an individual. Each story is personal. Recently, my daughter suffered eye damage. She was diagnosed with damage to her retina, but it wasn't clear what the cause was. For a week, we were in and out of hospital, and we didn't really know what was happening. There was briefly talk that the problem might be progressive. Fortunately, it isn't. Actually, I woke up this morning to a message from my wife telling me that she'd just been back for a checkup, and it was actually improving. So the damage is minor, and she is learning to cope. My family's lucky. We live in a country where we can get access to good quality eye care for free. But that experience brought home to us, in the most personal terms, what of course we know, how important eye health is for those you care about and love. Yesterday's discussion showed vividly how eye health and vision have widespread and profound implications for many aspects of life, health, education, work, sustainable development, and the economy. We all know this. And of course, almost everybody will experience impaired vision or an eye condition during their lifetime. There's an urgent need to provide universal, effective, efficient, equitable, and people-centered eye care across the globe. We all know this. Because eye care interventions are some of the most cost-effective and best value for money health interventions there are. But while we have the technology and treatments to improve eye health, financial and other barriers mean many have no access to the most basic of solutions. We all know this. Yet cost-effective, sight-restoring interventions and rehabilitation offer huge potential to improve the economic and personal outlay of individuals and nations. Of course, we all know this. And everyone in this room and across the sector work incredibly hard to provide access to eye care. Yet we still have 1.1 billion people with avoidable sight loss because they don't have access to the eye care they need. We all know this. Yet, if we all know this, what can we do to change it? We've come a long way, persuading governments and leaders, getting vision and eye health on the global and development agenda. In 2018, the Commonwealth leaders became the first heads of government to make a public commitment to the importance of eye health. In 2020, the World Health Assembly passed the resolution on integrated people-centered eye care, and in 2021, it agreed the challenging global targets for effective refractive error and cataract coverage. And also in 2021, the United Nations agreed their landmark first resolution on vision for everyone, setting out how critical eye health is to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and committing the international community to reach the over 1 billion people who don't have access to eye care by 2030. And we've gained many friends who've personally championed our goals, a number of whom are here today. And why wouldn't they? There's no political axe to grind about eye health. No leader could deny the importance of vision. And yet, still more than 1 billion people don't have access to the eye care they need. Eye care is still inaccessible and unaffordable for far too many, unless something changes. Unless something changes, the numbers missing out on prevention, screening, treatment, surgeries and glasses will continue to rise. The world's population is growing. By 2050, 2 billion more people will inhabit our planet. The number of people over 65 is predicted to double. And of course, sight loss becomes more common with every decade of life. And it's estimated that 1.3 billion people will have diabetes, putting hundreds of millions of people's sight at risk. By 2050, half the world's population will have myopia. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, computers, wearables. Our devices are changing the way we work, study, socialize, and live. And it's affecting everyone's lives, especially the young. Children are spending less time outdoors, less time looking into the distance, more time indoors on screens, leading to an explosive growth in myopia, unless we change something. No country can grow, and no child can reach their potential if they do not have access to education. But if that is to happen, all children must have regular, affordable eye tests and the glasses and treatments they need. We do know the answers. Unlike many of the problems the world faces, solving the eye health crisis is possible. In most instances, the solutions and treatments are cheap and effective. Existing technology offers us so many opportunities to transform the way we deliver eye care to more people, to diverse populations and remote communities. And emerging technologies offer the promise to address the unknown areas of eye health. We are seeing progress in a number of countries, but it's too piecemeal, it's too slow. The time has come to turn the fine words and commitments of the UN, the WHO, and the Commonwealth resolutions into action in every country for the more than 1 billion people who need eye care. We need a step change. In Caroline Casey's words, a decade of doing around the world. We want to do something extraordinary. Together, in 2026, 5 years after the passing of the resolution, we would like to bring together world leaders to hold the first ever Global Eye Health Summit. The time is right. In May, the Commonwealth Health Ministers called for a summit on eye health. This will be our response. Discussions with the UN Friends of Vision have confirmed it's the right idea at the right time. Last year, alongside the UN General Assembly, they convened a ministerial meeting hosted by the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda on vision and eye health. 3 Prime Ministers and almost 20 other ministers came together and passionately affirmed their support for our cause. And at that meeting, the Nepal Prime Minister announced their new eye care plan. The summit would be a seminal moment to trigger the step change that's needed. To be a success, it must shine a spotlight so that eye health is no longer the public health crisis that no one knows about. It may provide the opportunity to bring new funders and partners from inside and outside the sector to the table. But above all, it must galvanise action by governments in their countries to deliver on the global promises that they have made. We need them to follow Nepal's example and set out their plans and resources to deliver integrated people-centred eye care, achieve the global targets, and set us on the path to eliminating avoidable sight loss. It won't be easy. A summit can't stand alone. It will need to be the culmination of a 2-year campaign by all of us, starting now, to persuade and work with governments to bring their plans and commit to implement the UN resolution. A summit isn't the end point. We will need to follow up with expertise and support to turn those plans into reality. We'll all need to step up to the challenge. Everyone has a role to play. You're all leaders in the sector. You set the tone. You lead the way. A world on track to deliver eye health to everyone, everywhere. Our ambition is great. We're restless for change. Together, we can succeed. Thank you.
You don't get away that easily, Peter Holland. I see your attempt. Thank you, Peter. I'll keep you up here just briefly. You shared an audacious idea for a global eye health summit. One expects then to be sort of peppered with questions, but actually you're very good at asking questions, so let's flip it around the other way. What question would you like to ask this room about the summit? What's the question on your mind?
Are you in?
That is absolutely the question. We can do a snap poll. We'll find out. We won't do it through the app. No. I promise you that. I mean that is the inevitable question. And such a warmth in the room as a spontaneous response. But it sounded to me very clearly like this is a co-creation. So to what extent do you think such a summit will have goals, outcomes, or need such goals and outcomes at the start?
I mean, Ollie, you're right, and I think the first thing, and the point about the question of are you in, is that this has to be something that we do together. It cannot possibly be delivered by a small team, because you're the people who have the relationships and the knowledge all around the world. So that's the first point about that message, that if we're going to do this and if we're going to succeed, this has to be something that is for all of us. I think for me, and as I think I said in the speech, the critical change that we need to have is I think we have made real progress globally in terms of putting eye health on the agenda, and we've got fantastic leadership in terms of doing that. But it's that now the challenge is how do you translate that into real action at country and local level? So that for me is what the summit is, the way of rocket boosting that and leading that change.
Right, so we're not going to miss the opportunity here in Mexico City to harvest some of those thoughts. So what we've got is, we've got some large boards outside in the exhibition space. You really can't miss them. They're covered in very bright post-it notes, as you would expect. But I suppose there we're asking for your ideas, your thoughts on themes, as fresh in your mind as they might be. So I think that's really crucial. And just sort of hot, sort of off the press, if you like, I'm going to ask just a couple of sort of friends and board members of the IAPB. Is that Jen? I can see Jen Chen. If we can get a microphone down to you. I think you've had some sight of this idea, so it's not completely fresh to your mind. But Jen, I would love your reflections. And by the way, can we show our support for Jen Chen and of course James for such generosity over the years?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Chen from the Chen Yat-sen Family Foundation. This is my first IAPB as a trustee. I'm delighted to be here, and I've met so many of you over the last 2 days. I would love to publicly share our support for the Global Summit in 2026 on vision. And as we said, this is a joint effort. And Minister Humphreys, I echo your words. This is a joint effort that is of global significance. And it is also an urgent need. I think anyone who doesn't have clear vision should have it, and it isn't something for down the road. It should be for now. The 2021 resolution at the United Nations, so boldly led by Ambassador Webson, was 3 years ago, and the progress we've made has been good, but it's still not enough. 2030 is tomorrow, right? As you said, Minister Humphreys. So from our foundation, we'd like to publicly state our financial support as an anchor funder for the Global Summit in 2026, with a financial commitment of $250,000 US. So I would love for others to join. And I know that many people will be asking for support in kind as well as financial, so every bit counts, so let's join together to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Let's get a couple of other reflections. Peter, don't worry, I'm not going to start an auction now, but it might be worth just riffing a little bit on the sorts of support that we might be looking for. Just any thoughts that come to mind, and such generosity. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, summits are not cheap to do and to put on, and obviously we will be working, we hope, with champion countries to help us do it. We will need to build a team, so we will need the resources to do that, but that can be people as much as money. So if secondments as well as resources would be enormously helpful for members.
Right, now I have to put you on the spot. Have you decided where?
No. There you go.
Refreshingly simple answer, isn't it? Okay. I go to Dr. Caroline Harper, just down in the front row. Very keen to get your thoughts. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks very much, Ollie and Peter. Yeah, I'm Caroline Harper.
Caroline, up on that mic, thanks.
Can you hear?
Yes,
Yep.
Thanks so much.
I'm Caroline Harper. I'm the CEO of Sightsavers, and I've been coming to IAPB now for nearly 20 years. And actually, this is one of the most energizing ones I've actually been at. Although not quite energized enough to dance with you. I'm sorry, Caroline. But yeah, Sightsavers is really supportive of the Global Summit. I think what it will do is it will galvanize all of us. It will be something that we can all work towards over the next couple of years. And my goodness me, it will be a lot of work. One of the things I said at the board meeting is, you know, we can't think, oh, well, the IAPB will do everything we're currently doing, oh, and we're going to do the summit. You know, this is going to be the focus of everything that we're doing over the next 2 years. And we'll be thinking about everything and how does it fold in and how does it contribute to the summit? Because this could be an absolute game changer. It will bring governments together. It will bring eye health to the top of the agenda. And so over the next 2 years, I think the campaigning, and you know, shout out to Simon Darville. I think he's amazing. And, you know, I think we will be working, and Natasha Kennedy, who's my... Sorry, was that a clapping I heard there briefly?
Yes.
Yes. So Natasha Kennedy, who's my Director of Campaigns and Comms, who's done some fantastic work actually on disability campaigning in particular, will certainly be very involved. I'm not seconding her to you, Peter, you can't have her, but she will certainly be doing a lot of work, as will her team, as also will my advocacy team headed up by Juliet. So we will certainly be working with you and put a lot of our effort into doing that. So I would encourage everybody else to do so. I think this is a really good opportunity. But it is, you're absolutely right, it's not the culmination, because that almost sounds like it is the end point. So one of the things that we're going to offer to do is one of my most senior people, many people will know Dom Haslam. He is offered to chair what he's calling a sort of legacy committee, although that sounds a little bit of a, I don't know, I'm not sure the right title, but looking right from day one about what happens after the summit. How do we hold the governments to account for the commitments that we hope that they will make? What's the tracker of those? And ideally, what I'd like to see, which is what we're seeing in the disability sector, is more summits, so that this will be the first summit on global health. It will not be the only one. And we will move into the future, constantly refreshing and improving and adding to those commitments. So, yeah, we are in, Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. I just loop back round. Thank you very much, Peter. I will just, sorry, can I just borrow the mic one more time? Thank you so much. I'm going to put you on the spot, Minister Humphrey, if I may, only because you referenced your extraordinary Prime Minister in your opening remarks. Have you got a piece of advice for us as we set out on this journey towards such a summit about how to make it a real smash hit? Oh no, please come on down. Thank you very much. Sorry, Kirk, I am putting you on the spot, but I also noticed your applause as it was announced, so I hope there's a warmth in your heart.
No, there's definitely a warmth in my heart. I was here telling the director of the National Disabilities Unit, John Hollingsworth, who's next to me, that Barbados would be a great place to host that conference. So, but I do think a lot of the work that is done here needs to be shared. I think a good event sells itself, you know? And if people want to be associated with things that are successful, that have a cause but also are successful, we have to find a way to make people think that this is not a burden. I found as a minister responsible for persons with disabilities and other vulnerabilities that people begin by thinking, here comes a burden. And we have to reframe that narrative, you know, so that they don't see it as a burden. And I think if we can do that, then it becomes pretty easy. I think you've already won the support of many of the governments. And I just think we have to translate it to action, that's all.
Thank you, Minister Humphrey. That's very generous. Thank you. Thank you. We want to get snapshots from every single one of you, but as the day rolls by. So thank you in particular to Jennifer, and of course to Dr. Caroline Harper. Thank you to Minister Humphrey, and of course thank you to Peter again. Say this summit will be a focus of our attention and time over the months to come. That's for sure. But for now, a final thank you to Peter for sharing with such clarity and audacity such a big idea. Thank you, Peter. Well, I've already warned this hugely esteemed panel that I'm going to hijack them and use them as my focus group for the morning in the wake of Peter's announcement. We are absolutely honored to welcome to our stage 4 outstanding individuals. Let me tell you, or remind you, who they are individually. To my left, Dr. Roshan Pokhrel. I've so enjoyed meeting delegations with the extraordinary country of Nepal over the last 3 years. Dr. Roshan is the Honourable Health Secretary at the Ministry of Health in Nepal, and he is very welcome indeed to this gathering. Welcome, sir. Our next guest is Eufrosina Cruz, a change maker, an activist based here in Mexico, a federal deputy in Mexico, described by the UN as one of the 100 most powerful women in the world. Your work, Eufrosina, has taken you from rural classrooms to changes in the law, driving for a better world for women and the indigenous and Afro-Mexican peoples. We are hugely grateful for your presence and for your work. Eufrosina, welcome to our gathering. Amanda Davis needs little introduction, of course. She's the chair of the IAPB in the Western Pacific region. So no mean feat, given that means juggling relationships with at least 50, probably lots more stakeholder groups and organizations, and always keen to get your latest take. Welcome, Amanda. And of course, the OG, as they say, in terms of our field. And surely some of Peter's speech must have been part of the brainchild of Ambassador Webson, permanent representative of the mission of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations, and of course the founder and co-chair of the UN Friends of Vision, and a very, very dear friend of the IAPB. Welcome, Ambassador Webson. It's great to see you. Well, I did warn you, everybody. I'd like your initial reaction to this prospect of a world summit for global world leaders on eye health. Ambassador Webson, please.
Thank you very much, Ollie, and thank you all for being here once again. Ollie, before I answer the question, I must say sincere appreciation to Minister Humphreys, because he hit the ball out the park, 6 runs. Thank you very much, Minister, and I will certainly express my appreciation, but please do pass on our appreciation to your Honorable Prime Minister, who remains a champion for us, and we will work with her more closely going forward. And that leads me into the discussion on the summit, because we will be looking for global champions to help us as we advertise and bring this summit where the difference will be made in the work we are doing, where we must work towards 2030, and this summit is a major step forward. While we will be analyzing at the UN the assessment of where we are in the SDGs, we can use this summit to show where we are and how much we have to go in the next 4 years, from 2026 to 2030. And the champions and this summit should be a launching pad for global champions to be with IAPB and the iHealth community, and I look forward to it.
Here's to that. Thank you. A launch pad, indeed. A brief reflection. Amanda.
I think Peter put it well. The timing is right. I mean, we have the political momentum. We have a critical mass of people, which then amplifies down at that national level to get that groundswell of support. We have a strategy. We broadly know what we're going to do. We do need to fill in some of those gaps. And as Richard Curtis said, we have a great ambition. And I think the tagline, "We are ready," really fits with that.
Yeah, estamos listos. Right. Thank you, Amanda. Yusufina.
Buenos días a todas y a todos. Para mí, yo creo que estamos frente a una emergencia para las niñas y los niños que están hoy en una carencia visual. Por lo tanto, todos los líderes, todas las asociaciones, todos los gobiernos tenemos que dar prisa. Gracias.
That's a good endorsement. Thank you. Minister, gatherings matter, summits matter. Your reaction to this proposal?
I'm not a minister, only thank you anyway. The most important thing is that what we've been doing over the last 20, 30 years in Nepal, we've taken into consideration with the partners, the implementing agencies, and the government is there. But unless and until we take the politicians along with us, I don't think we'll be able to come to a solution. So this summit in 2026, with the politicians in mind, if we can make them understand the importance of health, not only eye health, any health, if we can make them understand that, I think by 2030 we may be able to reach our goals. Otherwise, it might be a long way to go. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Health Secretary. Now, may I ask you, sir, how would we know it had been a success? How should we measure such success? Any guidance?
Thank you, Oli. I don't know how I can say we measure success. Taking all of us at the same time will be the one thing. It's not only the developed countries, you should take into consideration the underdeveloped countries or the countries with low income. If you do not take them along with you, I don't think we'll come to a solution. So the most important thing is everyone should walk alone together. Like we have seen in COVID, the disparity that Nepal saw in COVID was very prominent. So that sort of disparity should not be seen in a world like us. So if that is there, I think we can move alone and reach our goal by 2030.
Yes, thank you. Now, extremely unfairly, we've got limited time to cover some very big topics. So I'm going to ask our guests to be brief, but knowing that you will stimulate conversation through our day. Ambassador Webson, we need to be in the business of activating large-scale change. Put as bluntly as you like, what is required now?
Thank you. Peter, in the last couple of years, the last 3, 4, 5 years, we have seen major global change through the United Nations, friends, and the efforts that we have put in. We have seen the IAPB and the work of its members and so on. We have seen global policies and so on. But the key thing here is to move what I call from paper to people. All of these policies and so on, and the great influence that these are having on ministers and on governments is wonderful. But it must move from the paper to people to bring change. And the other thing I would say that is important, linked to that, we must move from people's thinking to get away from thinking of the fear of blindness to rather think about the power of vision.
And let's build on that thought. Thank you, Ambassador Webson. Euphrosina, you've seen this in practice. How do you turn warm words, even commitments from government, into real action? What's your advice? What have you learned? How do you do it?
Pues exigir que sea una obligación y un derecho y no un privilegio hoy, porque yo vengo de un contexto adverso. Mi primera cita con un doctor de los ojos fue en mis 23 años. Yo tengo un ojo biónico porque yo vengo de una comunidad indígena en donde pues yo tuve astigmatismo y miopía y no pudieron salvar mi ojo. Y mi lucha de todos los días es precisamente eso, que en México, mi país, lo haga y lo vuelva un derecho y una política pública. Casi el 30% de las mexicanas, de los mexicanos hoy, tienen una carencia visual. Por eso es importante esta cumbre, exigir a los gobiernos a que lo hagan un derecho y una responsabilidad y no un privilegio.
And on that, if the commitment has been made, but still there is no action, as a change maker, any advice, any technique that you know has worked that we should be thinking about to push further, push harder?
Yo tengo una experiencia cuando fui de parte del gobierno, hicimos convenios con la iniciativa privada, porque no solamente es responsabilidad del gobierno, es de todas y de todos. Y llevamos estos estudios a las comunidades más alejadas. Un lente para una niña o un niño que tiene una adversidad es una oportunidad de conocimiento, de ver que el cielo es más azul. Y por eso es tan importante. A lo mejor los que nacieron en el privilegio no dimensionan lo que significa tener unos lentes, porque es la posibilidad de que ves el pizarrón más cerca. Y por eso hay que exigir al gobierno, pero también como sociedad, como organismos internacionales, hagamos estas alianzas.
It is that word, it is partnerships that is so important. Thank you. And we want to learn lessons from Nepal, actually. So I am going to come to you very shortly to understand what the many delegations here can learn. But I do want to touch on funding briefly, Amanda, because if we're going to really smash this, and overall as our goal for all of the delegates, we're going to have to unlock massive funding commitments. So what strategies work? What techniques are you seeing? What's your guidance?
So obviously there's a lot going on, innovative health, financing mechanisms, a lot of things. But I wanted to, I guess, say one thing. Firstly, a lot of the traditional funding structures will create that competitiveness and silos between our members. I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation. The IPB members, take out industry, annually have a turnover of $1 billion. I might drop that. Did someone cut that out? And it was interesting. In a session yesterday, Andrew Cooper asked his panel, hypothetically, what would you do with $1 billion? Well, guess what? We've got that. So how do we think differently about moving from a collaborative approach to a collective approach, using that funding to leverage and unlock additional funding? It has immense power and influence. And I think as a sector, we need to be starting to think differently. So we have a $1 billion industry right here, and that doesn't include our industry partners in the IPB.
And just a very quick glimpse of what public-private partnerships could look like. How are you seeing that shift? Are there new actors coming to the table on that?
Funding, do you mean? Yeah, I think that is different. I think the private sector, there's obviously a lot of for-profit, for-purpose groups that are coming up that are looking to be engaged. And I think we need to stop being so reactive to opportunities. And as I said, take that opportunity if we're in a position of strength, and to really start to pursue those opportunities with the private sector to see what we can unlock through that avenue.
Right, so thank you, Amanda. On that theme of unlocking, Dr. Roshan, clearly in Nepal, you have unlocked the most senior political will and commitment. What can we learn, particularly from countries who struggle to get to that very top table, about the techniques, about the framing that works to really cut through, especially on eye health?
Thank you, Oli. The most important thing is that if the higher political leaders understand the importance of eye health, then, for example, me being here today was because my Prime Minister went to the World Health Summit at New York, and my minister was there at Geneva for the World Health Assembly. So after they understood the importance of eye health, I'm here, you know, representing Nepal. So the most important thing is that they should know about the importance of eye health. And the second thing is, until and unless we go beyond health, you know, health beyond health is quite important. We people working in health know the importance of health. If you do not make other ministries and other politicians understand about health, then we are at a lost ground. And the politicians in countries like Nepal, they have different priorities, you know. They want short-term goals, you know, so that they can be elected, re-elected quickly. But investment in health is a long-term investment. If we do not make them understand that, then I think there is a problem out there. So it's a commitment from all the sides, you know, working together in health. We have 753 local governments. They have their own independence. There are 7 provincial governments. They have their own independent ways of working together, and there is the central government. So a coordinated approach effort to take them along is quite important, and if it is an integrated approach involving whole of the society with the politician in hand, then we can move ahead. And today's, as Peter rightly said, with the World 2026 Summit, this will take us further ahead. So that's what a country like Nepal had a problem. We still have a problem of taking them together with us, but we are working on it, and with all your support, I think we can work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm certainly drawn now to ask you, is there an achievement that you're proud of? I mean, as a team, of course, but especially on eye health. You talked about a journey, you hinted at a journey there, but something you stand by and say, yes, we went from A to B.
With the RAV assessment that we did in 1990 and the 2019 shows us there is a significant reduction in the blindness rate, you know. So there are certain achievements that a country like Nepal feels proud of. But if you see that on a world level, we are still lagging behind. So a combined effort will be needed. The work that we are doing, I'm proud of my companions, friends who are here, who work in eye health over the last 30, 40 years in Nepal. You know, I'm quite proud of the achievement, but we still have a long way to go, and I think with all the support from all our partners, I think we can move ahead.
Thank you. One thing that will be on a lot of our minds about the summit is how to make it as inclusive as possible, especially for any community at risk of being left behind. Who's got a piece of advice, a technique, something that we should be thinking about to make sure that this summit prioritizes the needs of the most vulnerable communities? Who would like to offer something? Amanda?
I think throughout IPB we have some terrific mechanisms. So through our regional processes, we convene members, and the members, of course, are working at that community level. And it's really critical to think that leadership doesn't just come from the top. It has to come from the bottom. It has to come from our communities. And we also have then really strong mechanisms with things like the World Sight Day campaign that sort of galvanizes that voice. So it's really utilizing that push-pull mechanisms that we have established in IPB, that we can be thinking about how we roll these out in relation to the summit to really start to get a groundswell from the bottom. I mean, even listening to Minister Humphrey's speech where he's talking about the PM who's influenced by her own experience with disability. It's like, you know, ministers are also influenced by what happens at the community and personal experiences. So I think it's getting that groundswell to inform the leadership as well.
I'll add to that.
Ambassador, please.
I would add that as we think of the summit, and as we think this has to be an inclusive environment, and a space that will see eye health not locked into, as our colleague from Nepal said, locked into the health sector. It is a development issue. And we have to broaden the thinking to include the concept around development. How does it fit into development? I also like the idea that Caroline threw out. What is the legacy we want to leave from this summit so that this is not a one-off? It's not just a feel-good, as I said to my colleagues in a recent summit, that this must be something that there is something that we can show after, and I believe that's about eye health in development.
So let's stick on that warning there, if you like. What's a danger zone? What's a pitfall that such a global gathering should avoid? What comes to your mind, Doctor, on that? Something, because you've seen so many gatherings, you know some are massively more effective than others. What must this not be?
It must not be just a gathering, you know. Whatever we learn on the gathering, if we can take that home and implement that, you know, immediately. Like, for example, this gathering has taught a lot of things. Yesterday's gathering, the experience of the lived experience of the people with eye problems, you know, and the political commitment today has made me aware of what to do immediately once I reach Nepal on Monday morning, you know. So my Monday morning work there will be to have a high-level eye health meeting immediately and implement the minimal service standards in the eye hospitals that we have, you know. So these things are quite important. So if you don't take what you learn out here and implement that immediately, I don't think we will reach our goals. So that will be my thought, Oli. Yeah. Thank you.
Eufrosina, something for the summit to avoid, a pitfall, a danger to avoid in order to be successful.
Yo creo que de igual manera que esto no haya sido una reunión de socialización, sino que de poner en el centro del debate de todo el reto que significa en muchos de los países como México y de exigir a que se vuelva una obligación como una salud pública de derecho, porque esto también tiene que ver con el avance de romper la violencia hacia las mujeres, porque de este porcentaje, la mayor parte que carecen la salud visual son las mujeres. Ahora imagínense a las mujeres indígenas, ahora imagínense a las niñas indígenas. Pues es imposible que vayan a un doctor. ¿Por qué? Porque pues, ni siquiera saben que hay una especialidad que cura la vista. Ahora a las abuelitas que tienen que bordar, a las artesanas. Entonces, por lo tanto, en todas ellas tenemos que pensar para romper la brecha de desigualdad hacia las niñas y hacia las mujeres, para que nunca más una niña deje un espacio en un salón de clases por falta de la salud visual. Porque, vuelvo y repito, yo vengo de la adversidad y es bien frustrante, bien doloroso, el que no puedas ver qué dice el pizarrón y no sabes qué es, ni siquiera mamá y papá, porque mamá y papá nunca habían ido a un doctor para ver qué tiene su hija y su hijo. Por eso, este encuentro que sirva de eso, de reflexionar, de asumir cada uno de nosotros como sociedad, como iniciativa privada, como organismos internacionales, pero sobre todo como gobiernos. Hacer esto como una obligación de derecho a esas personas que están ahí esperando una oportunidad de vida.
Thank you, Eufrosina. Massively helpful to join those dots on the ability to see impacting confidence, which impacts contribution, productivity, results. So powerful, thank you. We're going to go super quick fire just in our final 3 minutes, so I'm only going to ask for a thought starter really. One on engaging the private sector, and then I'm going to go quickly on to scaling up solutions as well. Amanda, I'll draw on you for that. Ambassador Webson, you've seen techniques from around the world. How do we really bring even more contribution resources from the private sector to this table?
By engaging the private sector from now in everything we do. You know, we must have the private sector as part of the thinking around the summit, as part of the planning for the whole eye health industry, and we cannot limit it to healthcare. it has to be opened up to development, as I said. So I think the engagement of the private sector at all levels in the process, and even encouraging in the next IAPB meeting a private sector forum or discussion would be very useful.
Thank you, Ambassador. Amanda, briefly, forgive me, so many innovative solutions just crying out for that sort of scale-up, sort of turbocharge. What techniques should we be focusing in on to really scale up?
Well, a couple of things, and I think that often we look to the government and ensuring that things are embedded within the government to ensure sustainability, which is true. But there's a private sector or I guess a third sector that can be working for scale that works within a government ecosystem but isn't necessarily the government system. And there's some plenty good examples of that we have that have scaled. One that comes to mind, LVP in India, where they have worked within the government structures, but they're not a government organization, and they have created phenomenal scale in pretty short period of time. So I think it's thinking within that government sustainability model, but you can think outside of that, and that's how we can think to engage the private sector.
And here's a terribly tricky question, I suppose. To what extent is technology part of the problem, part of the solution? It's a bit of a paradox.
Has to be. I mean, we're moving at the sound of light with technology. It has to be part of the solution, but the technology isn't the solution. It's the ecosystem where the technology fits, and making sure that the enabling environment is there to enable the technology to succeed. That's the key.
I'm just going to ask you, Dr. Roshan, a final question, and it is a bit more personal, I'm afraid, which is you've made it so clear that getting the highest leaders on board is crucial. If that still proves tricky, what is a technique to actually do that? Because everyone will agree, yes, of course we have to do it, but we just can't seem to break through out of this ministry, out of that department. We have to get into the cabinet, you know.
So countries like Nepal, you know, the most important thing for us will be the awareness part and the education part. So the education is still going up. We're still lagging behind education. So if the whole of the society is educated, I think the importance of health will definitely be known to everyone. So the education part is very important, and unless and until we can educate all of our society as a whole, I don't think we'll come to a solution. So the education will be the most important thing in a country like Nepal.
We are massively grateful to your commitment to this cause and for your attendance here. So I would say to you, Dr. Roshan Pokhrel, to you, Christina Cruz, of course, to Amanda Davis, and of course to Ambassador Webson, thank you very much indeed. Massively appreciated. Thank you.